to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 95, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. We are still in National Sewing Month, and I hope that you're finding fun ways to celebrate with your own sewing or with groups of friends, new projects, all sorts of things. Maybe learning a new skill, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I didn't do a lot of sewing last week. We took our pigs up to the processor on Friday, and that took most of the day because we have to travel 91 miles in one direction. And unfortunately, that meant that I missed the Cassandra Zanabione meet and greet that we had at the quilt store. I think I might have mentioned that Cassandra is a designer for Wyndham Fabrics, and she just moved to Kalispell, and I'm hoping to get her on the podcast at some point. I did find some time on Thursday to get my Bernina 700 Pro embroidery machine set up and do a little bit of embroidering. And on Saturday, I attacked the mountain of leftover fabric scraps. I have a bin underneath my cutting table, and when I'm done working on a project, I chuck the leftovers into that bin, and the bin was starting to overflow, so it was time to get the scraps out, and the larger ones I start by cutting down into 5-inch squares because we have a lady at our church who sews them into comforter tops that we tie and give to the Mennonite Central Committee to give to people in need around the world. Anything that's smaller than that, sometimes I can get tumblers out of them. They might get cut into 2.5-inch blocks. Strips are anything wider than about an inch. I don't keep anything narrower than that. I just don't use them. Strips go into bags based by color. And I've got a couple of very overflowing bags that need to be dealt with pretty soon too. So I'll either start working on some scrap quilts or I'll package those up and get them ready to take to the Mennonite Central Committee Relief Sale, which is held the first weekend in October in Ritzville, Washington. And I like to go over there. I have a quilt to donate this year. I've got some craft supplies to donate. It's a lot of fun, and I always enjoy that drive. Ritzville is about an hour west of Spokane, so I usually make a weekend of it and go spend the weekend in Spokane. Other than that, I did finish the Amanda Murphy Serger Forest table runner. That's at the store right now as a display sample. It turned out beautifully. I was so happy with it. It was one of those projects when I finished, I wanted to keep going back and looking at it because it was so pretty. I've also sorted a lot of my fabric. I'm putting away my summer fabrics and getting my winter fabrics out so that I can start working on some winter projects. So that's what's been happening here. Nothing terribly exciting. A week from today is the Kafe Fassett and Brandon Mabley event at our quilt store. Kafe is giving a lecture on Monday evening at our local high school, and then 2 days of quilt workshops, and I'm in the Tuesday workshop on the economy block. So watch for that in a couple of weeks. I'm sure I'll do a big recap about that. But before I jump into today's topic, I just want to do some more housekeeping. Stephen, if you're listening, you sent me an email about industrial sewing, and I tried to respond, but your email keeps bouncing back to me because it says your mailbox is full. So maybe check that, and I will try again in a couple of days to get back in contact with you. We're about a month away from the 100th episode, and that's going to be a listener question episode. I've gotten lots of great questions. I probably have enough for 2 episodes at this point, but if you still want to get a question in, absolutely feel free. Email me at janet@janetzabo.com, and we'll try to get you in on the listener question episode. I have not forgotten about getting an email blast system set up for notifying people when there has been a new episode released or a blog post, but I'm still working on the mechanics of that, so give me a couple of weeks to get that in place before that happens, but it's still on the list of things to do. Okay, let's get into today's topic. I decided to talk about machine embroidery today, and part of the reason I wanted to talk about that is because that is a new area that I have just begun to explore. It's not something that I ever thought that I would be interested in doing, to be honest. I love to do hand embroidery. I do a lot of that in the evenings during the winter while my husband and I are watching television after dinner. But I wasn't all that keen on machine embroidery. We have a couple of women in our craft co-op that meets on Thursday afternoons or Thursday during the day who do a lot of machine embroidery, and I saw all the beautiful things that they make. My friend Tara has done a lot of machine embroidery, and my friend Dina, who lives in Tennessee, went whole hog with her embroidery and bought a commercial machine and is now doing custom embroidery and has built up quite a business. So I had lots of exposure to people doing machine embroidery, but I thought I've got plenty of other things to keep me busy. However, I do teach at the quilt store, and I teach sometimes the Bernina events. And the last Bernina event that I taught included some machine quilting in the hoop, which is a variation of embroidery. I learned what I needed to know for that class, and the store owner was also there and helping out, so I wasn't completely on my own. But I thought I really need to become more knowledgeable about machine embroidery. When it came time to choose my classes at Bernina University, I very deliberately chose several machine embroidery classes because I thought, what better way and what better place to learn about machine embroidery on the Bernina machines that I'm teaching on than at Bernina University. So I took two specific classes. One was making a little tea caddy. And for that one, I was on a 770, I think, or maybe a 700 Pro. I don't remember. It was one of the 7 series machines. And then for the other class, where we embroidered on a tote bag and a towel and a hat, I was actually on the top of the line Bernina 990 machine. I should note that I have a Bernina 880 sewing machine that I bought used last year from one of the ladies at our store in our community who bought a 990. I bought her old 880, and it's a fabulous machine. I love it. I know there's a lot of controversy about that model. It came with an embroidery module, but I had never set the embroidery module up to use it with the 880. I also didn't really want to tie up the 880 doing embroidery. I use that machine almost every day for garment sewing and other kinds of sewing, and I didn't want to have to be reconfiguring it because it's not simple to reconfigure my setup to switch from garment sewing to machine embroidery. So I decided to take the leap because I'm teaching these classes on these machines. I took the leap and I ordered a Bernina 700 Pro. That is Bernina's embroidery only machine. It does not do any sewing. It doesn't have feed dogs. It is a dedicated embroidery machine. Most of my students are on either a 7 series machine or the 990, and I felt it was important to be able to be conversant with those higher end features. So that's why I decided to go with the 700 Pro. The embroidery module from the 880 fits on the 700, so I didn't have to buy another embroidery module, although depending on how long this episode goes, I may talk about that a little bit because I ran into some issues that you might deal with at some point. So right off the bat, I want to say that I don't know a lot about machine embroidery. I am learning. So I welcome any advice or wisdom from other people. I am a sponge when it comes to machine embroidery. And the purpose of this episode is maybe to encourage those of you who are thinking about machine embroidery but haven't taken the leap. If you're an experienced machine embroiderer, please do not look for any epiphanies from me. You're not going to get them from me because, as I said, I'm just starting out. But sometimes hearing from somebody who's just starting out will help those people who aren't quite sure where to start. And I was one of those people. At Sew Expo last year, I actually went into one of the embroidery supply booths, and I said to the salesperson that was there, what stabilizer do I need if I want to do a basic embroidery project? Because I didn't even know where to begin. And she said, well, what do you want to make? And I said, truly, I don't know. I just know that I want to do a basic embroidery project. So there was a little bit of a communication issue there. I guess I wasn't getting across what I wanted to do, and she really wanted more information from me than I had. I mean, I was truly a rank beginner, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So I think I came out of there with a roll of a basic cutaway stabilizer. But having someone take a few minutes to explain to me what I needed to know about stabilizers would have been helpful. I also did take a stabilizer boot camp class at Bernina University, so I feel a little more confident now. But as I said, this episode is not aimed at those of you who are experienced. It's aimed at people like me who just want to get started. The first thing I would say is, if you're interested in machine embroidery, maybe find a friend who's got a machine embroidery capable machine if yours doesn't, and ask them if they could show you how it works or give you a little tutorial about it, because machines that have embroidery modules attached operate in a very interesting way. The embroidery module, at least on my Bernina, hooks into the machine on the left-hand side, and it's got a cross arm that holds the hoop, and it moves it back and forth. And you'll understand a lot more about machine embroidery if you can actually see that mechanical device in action. So maybe ask a friend who's got a machine if you can try it out. I think it will be a very enlightening experience. If you don't have a friend that's got a machine that can do embroidery, by all means, go to a store. Our store is great about demoing machines and features. We have machines that we can set up on a display area that you can try out, and just explain to the store owner or the salesperson that's helping you that you're just learning about machine embroidery and you would like to see how the machine works. As with most machines, whether you're doing sewing or serging or embroidery, there is a range of machine capabilities and a wide budget depending on what you've got available to spend. My sense, and I could be wrong about this, but my sense is that the lower end models are more constrained in the size of the design that they can do. The higher end models have larger hoop areas and can do more intricate designs. If all you're planning to do is maybe monogram towels or small designs, one of the lower end machines might be perfect for you. If you want to get into doing larger designs or clothing, you may have to spend more. You could start with something as basic as a Brother PE 535 machine, which you're limited to a maximum size of, I think, 4 inches by 4 inches, but that machine is $500. So it would be a good way to get your feet wet. If you have a slightly larger budget, you can go up into the $2,000 range and look at the Baby Lock Flair or some of the Janome machines. Some of the Burnett models are in the $1,500 range. So if embroidery is your thing or you think it's going to be your thing, those would be the places to start if you're limited in your budget or you know that you're not going to be doing large embroidery projects. And again, some machines are both sewing and embroidery capable, like my 880. Some machines are dedicated embroidery machines. I should also mention the Brother Skitch, which Joann's, I think, was selling. At least I remember seeing those toward the end right before they closed. I don't know a lot about that machine except what I've seen on Jen's video on Sewing Report Live, and she wasn't real enthused about that machine. I will try to put a link to those videos so you can go check those out if you're interested. Machines are tricky. It's a balancing act. I've been in too many situations where I've seen people buy too much machine for themselves. I've also seen situations where people buy a lower end machine and outgrow it within a couple of months and then end up having to upgrade. Okay, as I mentioned, hoop size seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of people. What is the largest area that you can embroider? And now you will see several of the companies, Bernina included, who are emphasizing the ability of quilters to be able to quilt in the hoop. So maybe you're an embroiderer who is interested in getting into quilting. You can use your embroidery machine to quilt rather than getting a dedicated quilting machine or quilting on your sewing machine. The only in the hoop quilting that I've done was for the Bernina event that I taught, and we were making a table runner that had some flying geese blocks in it. And we actually quilted the flying geese blocks in a quilting hoop. I will be honest with you and say that this would not be my first choice for quilting. For that particular project, it worked really well. And I think if you were doing a block where you had to have the same motif over and over again in the block, that would be a great application because it's very consistent. It also gives you the look of free motion quilting, but without you having to do free motion quilting. So if that's not something that you're comfortable with yet, having the machine do the quilting for you is fabulous. I'm not sure I would do a whole quilt, but I think I do need to play around with that a little bit more. So the embroidery hoop on a machine works very similarly to the old-fashioned embroidery hoops that you see for doing hand embroidery. There's an inner hoop and an outer hoop, and there's usually some kind of clamping system. And on one of the sides, there is some kind of mechanism that attaches the hoop to the embroidery module. I will tell you about the hoops that Bernina has available, not because I think you should buy a Bernina, but because those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. And I would imagine that Baby Lock and Janome and Brother all have very similar types of hoops. So the ones that I have for my machine are the standard hoops with the inside hoop and the outside hoop, and they have a thumb screw or some kind of dial to tighten the hoops together. I've also got some of the new magnetic hoops, and I really like the magnetic hoops a lot. They require a little bit of care. Develop a healthy respect for your magnetic hoops, because I have seen people need Band-Aids after using the magnetic hoops. The magnets are extremely strong, and if you are not prepared for them to join together, you may find that you get a finger stuck in between. So what I have discovered and what I was told at Bernina University is to put the bottom hoop on the table and to hold the top hoop kind of vertically or at a slight angle and let it drop onto the bottom hoop. If you try to control how it drops onto the bottom hoop will leap up and meet the top hoop and catch your finger in between. So just be aware that the magnetic hoops are great, but they do require a little bit of care and respect. There are also clamp hoops, and those are when you are quilting or embroidering on a quilt or quilting on a quilt using your embroidery machine. The clamp hoops can accommodate the thickness of a basted quilt where you've got the top and the batting and the backing. So that's a quick and dirty on hoops. I will tell you what I know about stabilizers, and I'm most familiar with the OESD stabilizers. That's Oklahoma Embroidery Supply and Design, and they have a lot of embroidery supplies. The other quilt store in town is a Kimberbell dealer, and they also have a lot of supplies. So you may be able, depending on where you are and what your store carries, be able to find one or the other. So I was told that if you wear it, don't tear it. So if you're going to embroider on clothing, you need a cutaway stabilizer. If you're not going to be embroidering on clothing, you can use a tearaway stabilizer. You may need to use a water-soluble stabilizer for certain applications. There is, OESD has something called Stable Stick, which is an adhesive. We used that when we were embroidering our ball caps at Bernina University. So we were actually using I didn't mention this, but there are hoops for embroidering on socks and caps. So we were using the hoop insert for embroidering on a cap, but we had to actually hoop with the stable stick and adhere the cap to the stable stick in order to do the embroidery on it. I've been using something called polymesh this week, because what that allows you to do is you hoop the polymesh or you hoop the stabilizer and then you float your embroidery project on top of it. So let's say your embroidery project maybe isn't as large as the hoop. You can still hoop with the stabilizer and use that as a base. And then you can float your embroidery project on top of it. And sometimes you might want to baste it down and the machine can do that for you. Or sometimes you just lay it on top of the stabilizer and embroider your project that way. I haven't tried it yet, but I also think that there is a stabilizer if you want to make embroidered patches. I found it very helpful to go to my quilt store and look at the OESD stabilizer display and just read the labels. And most stabilizer companies will also put out some kind of guide so that you know what type of stabilizer you need for what project. It's actually a lot like learning about interfacing. And, sometimes you just have to experiment. So you've got your machine, you have your hoop, you have your stabilizer. Let's talk about thread. And you might want to go back and listen to the episode that I did on thread. I'll have to look up what number that was. But I do a thread class where I talk about the different kinds of threads and their applications. And the two threads that are most commonly used in embroidery seem to be a trilobal polyester and rayon threads. Some people also use metallics. I haven't experimented with those yet, but I use a lot of metallic threads in my serger, so I'm sure it's only a matter of time before I start using them in my embroidery machine. And the reason I think that the trilobal polyester and the rayon threads are so popular is because they're pretty shiny and they reflect the light. And if you're going to go to all of that work to do the embroidery, you want people to be able to see it. A trilobal thread is actually a filament type thread. It's not spun in the conventional sense. And the reason it's called trilobal is because in cross section it actually looks like a triangle. And that triangle shape allows the light to bounce off of it. So some pretty popular trilobal polyester threads are like Isacord, Wonderfill. I'm a Wonderfill educator. They have a thread called Polyfast. And to be honest, I have never seen that in stores. Our store carries Isacord. I did order some Polyfast because I want to try it out. I am a big fan of the Wonderfill Fabulux trilobal polyester, but that is a variegated, and the Polyfast is a solid. And for now, because our store carries it, I've been using the Isacord and I'm quite happy with it. Superior Threads has Magnifico. I haven't used that one yet either, but that's also a trilobal polyester. I did find some interesting information on Superior Threads website where they talk about how trilobal polyester has replaced rayon thread. It says, I'm going to read it to you. It says, rayon threads used to be the go-to thread choice for embroidery until high sheen trilobal polyester threads were invented about 20 years ago. Polyester threads are better than rayon threads for sewing and embroidery applications because polyester fibers are color fast. Rayon threads can bleed if washed with a strong detergent or bleach. Polyester fibers have greater UV resistance than rayon threads and won't fade in the sunlight as quickly as rayon threads, and polyester has a stronger tensile or breaking strength. When you think about how quickly the machine is running when it's doing embroidery, you want a thread that's not going to break. If rayon is your thing, though, by all means use rayon. There are lots of good, high-quality rayon threads out there. Wonderfill has several. Floriani is another popular machine embroidery thread. Again, I don't use that because I'm not sure that anyone around here carries it. But if you have access to that, that's absolutely a great choice as well. So you have your machine, you have your hoop, you have your stabilizer, you have your thread. What are you going to embroider? And by what are you going to embroider, I mean what design are you going to embroider? So again, this varies by machine. Some machines have lots and lots of built-in designs and some don't. Some have lots and lots of built-in fonts and some don't. However, most machines have some way to get an external file into the machine so that it can be embroidered. I think on most machines these days it's a USB stick. Our store owner had a great suggestion. She told people in our mastery class that we should actually have 2 USB sticks, one labeled in and one labeled out, so that anything that we're transferring to the machine is on the in stick and anything that we want to save is on the out stick so that it doesn't accidentally get overwritten or deleted. In terms of third-party designs, I have just started to fall down this rabbit hole. Urban Threads has a lovely website. If you go to Etsy, the possibilities are almost endless. Kimberbell, if your store happens to be a Kimberbell dealer, OESD, all of these places have absolutely stunning embroidery designs that you can purchase and use on your machine. One of the places that I've been having a lot of fun poking around is Bernina has a blog called We All Sew. And if you go to the We All Sew blog, they have projects of all kinds, sewing projects, overlocker projects, embroidery projects, and I've done 2 of theirs so far. One is a patriotic pincushion, and the other one is a sawtooth star block that you can turn into an iron-on patch. And they make those files available, and you can download them for free. I should talk about file types here. So my machine will read EXP files and BQM files. BQM files are Bernina Q-matic files, and they're also the file type that's used on the long arm machines. So you may not be able to use those unless you have a Bernina, but the EXP files I think are fairly universal. There are some other file types, and I would suggest looking at your documentation for your machine to find out what's recommended. And you might be thinking, hey, I want to make my own embroidery designs. I want to make a custom logo or something else for a business. At that point, you need to start looking into digitizing software. And again, I haven't played around a lot with this, but my sense is that you get what you pay for. So there are some free and maybe low-end, low-cost programs out there. But if you really want the powerful abilities to digitize and do custom designs, those are going to be more pricey. Embrilliance is one. Hatch digitizing software is another. Bernina has their own digitizing software. I use Affinity Designer and Affinity Publisher and Affinity Photo, and I did a little poking around to see if maybe I could export a file in some kind of format that's usable on my embroidery machine, but I'm still exploring that, and I haven't come up with anything definitive yet. These are the kinds of projects that I'm wishing I could make 24 more hours in the day to work on, so I am sure that some of you can identify with that. I don't want this episode to get too long, and this is a topic that we could explore in depth, and we'll probably do that in future episodes. We haven't really even talked about commercial embroidery machines. My friend Dina, who lives in Tennessee, she started out with a domestic machine, and I think she literally burned it up doing embroidery. So she went to a 10-needle commercial machine and has built up her business around that. Our store just got in a floor model of the Bernina E16, 16-needle commercial industrial or commercial embroidery machine. And I am eager to see that one in action. So again, if you have words of wisdom to add, please let me know. If I got anything wrong, definitely let me know that so I can correct it. I don't want to be spreading misinformation about embroidery. Feedback is always welcome. You can email me at janet@janetzabo.com. You can leave a comment on the show notes page, and you can use the fan mail feature. I do try to respond to everybody if your mailbox is not full. So give me a shout out, send me an email, just let me know what you're thinking. Show notes for this episode can be found at the podcast website, which is www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and that has links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website and my blog. And the blog is where you can see details and photos of what I've been working on. Most of that usually makes its way to Instagram, but the blog has a much more comprehensive explanation of what I've been working on. And you might also get to see pictures of little fuzzy chicks and other animals that we have here on the farm. So I would invite you to check that out. I appreciate the reviews that I've been getting on Apple. So thank you for those. The podcast continues to grow. The 2-year anniversary of the podcast was this past week, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to talk about sewing every week for 2 years, but I can and I will, and I'll continue to do that as long as there are things to talk about. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. So until our next episode, I hope you have a great week and that you get to go sew or maybe embroider something.